Please remain seated. The show will begin in 3, 2...
Like a Hellcat.
Disney has just recently had its 100-year anniversary, and a beloved classic of the very first debut of a certain infamous mouse just went public domain after the company lost its copyright. I'm sure many of you are familiar with the 1928 cartoon short called Steamboat Willie, but does anyone really know the actual story of its dark and gruesome history? That's where I come in. The Walt Disney Company has tried to silence me and my family for the last 95 years, since Steamboat Willie made his first appearance. This time the truth will be known, so that we may finally find peace. Everyone in my family worked for the Walt Disney Company, starting with my great-grandfather, grandfather, then my father, mother, brother, and sister, and then me. My great-grandfather Joseph was a professional animator and writer who actually had a big impact on the creation of Steamboat Willie, and he and Walt Disney himself were good friends. He passed away when my grandpa reached his freshman year in college, and what I'm about to share with you is something Disney has tried covering up for a long time, because they don't want their reputation being damaged by anyone whom they've wronged. My grandfather is currently in his 80s, and I often visit him in Florida during summer vacations when I'm not at university. I was hired on the spot to work in the animation department due to the higher-ups knowing about my family having history with the company to begin with. I didn't need to go for an interview, and they offered me a pretty good deal: free room and board at the Disney Resort and half-off discounts at retail shops and many food vendors. It was too good to be true, but at first things went relatively well. But once my grandpa discovered I had gotten a job there, he was less than thrilled. Grandpa Philip called me up during my first week of employment, and he said that once I finished my 9-hour shift, I had to meet him at his apartment. I was confused and perplexed by his erratic behavior, but I couldn't say no. He and I sat down at the dining room table drinking black coffee, and immediately I noticed how anxiously his expression seemed to show a heavy reluctance, as if he desperately wanted to speak, but couldn't. I asked him what was the matter. His eyes darted around the room, and he just examined his surroundings cautiously, like he felt this presence, this darkness just engulfing the space and making itself known. But only he could sense it. He took a deep breath, exhaling calmly before speaking. He said when he was 19, he was given the same offer to work at Disney Studios as a cartoonist and storyboard consultant. His father, great-grandpa Joseph, had pulled some strings, and he was able to get his foot in the door. Now, things were relatively normal until Grandpa mentioned that his father became a different person after nearly a year and a half. Dodgy, overly defensive, ill-tempered, paranoid, and eventually becoming a mindless, unrecognizable sitting sack of meat who dedicated more time in the studio than interacting with people. Grandpa said that there is existing footage of several Steamboat Willie cartoons after the 8-minute short came out that were never released to the public, and that his father had come across these one day when digging through the archives to find inspiration for the next big thing that audiences could enjoy. He was assigned with brainstorming new ideas to present to the rest of the staff. But when he attempted to show them the films of the other Steamboat Willie cartoons, he was rejected and was ordered to toss them out. But upon returning home, my great-grandfather actually kept them and would secretly watch every single one with his film projector. My grandpa would return after a long shift, To see his father engrossed, his eyes glued to the projection screen. He wouldn't eat, would barely sleep, wouldn't even talk to him. When my grandpa would try to shut off the film, his father would turn into this aggressive, violent person and would physically try to strangle him. Eventually, his father had to be put away, and he struggled trying to break loose from the nurses that dragged him away into a large white van, having sedated him when placing him in a straitjacket. He had to be closely monitored while in solitary confinement. He was rarely allowed visitors. The only words he would ever mutter were,
"The mouse is out. The mouse is out. The mouse is out."
My grandfather tried to ignore all of it, shrugging it off as his father being overworked and underpaid, and having snapped because of the pressures of the job. His father soon after died of a heart attack, or so it seemed. There was something disturbing about how his father's body was discovered. He had this wide, unsettling grin, and his whole bare flesh was covered in bloody, carved images of mouse ears, the same message etched on his stomach and on the walls. The mouse is out. The mouse is out. The mouse is out. My grandfather left work early a couple weeks later and began watching the film reels himself. To this day, he deeply regrets it. He said that the screen was static for a few minutes each time, and often glitchy before the image of the steamboat came into view. The music was not cheerful, just distorted, and Willie was sometimes unresponsive, and other times just morphed in a grotesque form of mutation. Rabid, demonic. In the beginning, Willie was normal as normal could be. Happy, carefree, and Minnie also made some short appearances. But even she acted oddly as the films progressed on. She would try to say hello to Willie and touch him, but Willie would be cold and dismissive, would pretend to not acknowledge her at all. He even would swear and threaten to throw her overboard. My grandfather was in shock. Why would the company produce shit like this to begin with? Disney was supposed to be about making magic and happy memories. Something was definitely not right. And my grandpa was determined to find answers. The first film reel of the cartoon show was dated November 12th, 1929, and it was called Willie's Next Adventure. The show itself was named Return of Captain Willie. As said before, the show started off as cheerful. Willie and Minnie were on the boat, heading east to find treasure. Willie was at the wheel, and Minnie was peeling and cutting potatoes in the back on the lower deck. So far, pretty chill and nothing out of the ordinary. Until 20 minutes in. Willie was still at the wheel, and Minnie reluctantly came up the steps to ask the captain if they were almost at their destination. The captain didn't respond. The screen got glitchy and went static again, and then Minnie asked the same question again. Willie then slowly turned his head and stared at her firmly, saying that they would be there soon and that she needed to go back to work. Minnie lowered her head sadly and reluctantly went back downstairs. Then the screen went black as the film reel reached its end. My grandpa wanted to continue on with the next film reel, but couldn't at that moment. He felt drained, he told me. He didn't know why. He took his paid vacation, trying to clear his mind, but every night after watching the first episode, he had begun having these bad dreams about Captain Willie, urging him to play the next episode of the cartoon. Willie appeared more monstrous in these dreams, 10 feet tall, his eyes dark and hollow, then slowly revealing sharp, jagged teeth and sharp claws. He would tilt his head to the side and gesture for my grandpa to come closer. But my grandfather always refused, and he would wake up in a cold sweat. He thought that was the end of it at first. My grandpa was sorely mistaken. Every night he was plagued with the same dream, being chased by Willie, and sometimes waking up with deep scratches. The worst of it? My grandpa would see Willie while at work. That thing would follow him and cause nearly fatal accidents to him and other staff members. But only he could see this entity. He realized his dad opened a big can of worms that could never be closed. Thus, Willie was no longer just a cartoon mouse, but a curse placed upon our family. I don't care if no one believes us. Willie.exe exists. He's real. And I should have quit my job and took heed to my grandpa's warnings. I should have not watched those film reels. They should have been destroyed.